My life was never as perfect as it looked from the outside. People think that being born into money, status, and a big house means happiness, but that's not true. I learned early on that love and peace can't be bought, especially when your own mother wants to control every single thing you think, say, or do. My mother, Vivian, was the kind of woman who changed the air in every room she entered. She always wore pearls, always had flawless hair, and always carried that smile, calm, polished, and dangerous. To strangers, she looked like the perfect picture of grace and kindness, the type of woman society praised. But behind closed doors, that smile was nothing but a mask. At home, she was a storm. And growing up in her house, I was always bracing myself for the next strike. When I was little, I didn't get to choose anything for myself. My clothes, my friends, my hobbies, even the boys I was allowed to talk to, those choices weren't mine. They were hers. If I dared to dream for myself, she would remind me who I belonged to. "You're my daughter, Nicole," she'd say, "don't you ever forget it." My father was gentle, kind, but quiet. He was always in the background, the type of man who kept peace by keeping silent. And though he had the power to stand up to her, he rarely did. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was love twisted into submission. So for years, I lived a life that wasn't mine. Every laugh, every tear, every choice, I gave them all away just to survive her control. Until one day, I couldn't anymore. Something inside me broke, or maybe it finally woke up. I decided I wasn't going to sacrifice my life on the altar of her expectations any longer. I walked away. I built a new life, quietly and carefully. I found love, real love. The kind that didn't demand, didn't control, didn't suffocate. I got married. I had a son. For the first time, I understood what joy felt like, raw and real. And for 6 years, I kept it all hidden from her. She didn't know about my husband. She didn't know about her grandson. She didn't know that I had finally found happiness. I thought I had outrun her. I thought I had built a wall strong enough to keep her out. But fate doesn't always care about walls. It was my son's 5th birthday. The living room was filled with laughter, balloons, and the sweet smell of cake. Friends gathered, my husband by my side, my little boy glowing with excitement. It was the kind of moment I had always dreamed of, the kind of moment that proved I had made the right choice. And then the door opened. There she was, my mother, Vivian, wearing pearls, wearing that dangerous smile, holding a velvet box in her hand. She didn't need to say a word, her presence alone was enough to silence the room. That was her gift, her curse. She could control a crowd without even raising her voice. She thought this was her moment of triumph. She thought she was walking back into my life to claim what she believed was hers, my obedience, my son, my future. But what she didn't know was that the daughter she once controlled no longer existed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a mother now. And that made me stronger than she could ever imagine. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next, when my son looked up at her with innocent eyes and said the one word that shattered the lie I had been protecting for 6 years. Grandma. The word hung in the air like shattered glass. Grandma. Every voice in the room went silent. Balloons floated gently against the ceiling, the cake candles flickered, but all I could hear was that single word echoing in my ears. My son, my sweet 5-year-old boy, had no idea what he had just done. He only knew what I had whispered to him in bedtime stories, what I had slipped out when he asked questions I couldn't answer. He knew there was a grandmother, far away, someone he had never met. I had told him little fragments, carefully edited truths. But to him, the moment he saw her standing there, well-dressed, confident, and older, something in his innocent heart connected the dots. Grandma, he repeated, his little face lighting up with curiosity and warmth. Vivian's smile deepened, not the kind of smile you give when meeting a child for the first time, but the kind of smile a general gives when realizing the enemy just revealed their weakest point. She looked at me, not him, her eyes gleaming with triumph. In that one moment, she knew. The lie was gone. The secret I had protected for 6 long years had unraveled in a single word from the lips of a child. I froze. My hands shook. My husband, Daniel, reached for me under the table, squeezing my fingers tight. His presence grounded me. He leaned close, whispered softly so only I could hear, "Breathe, Nicole. Don't let her win." But inside, my mind was spiraling. The years of hiding, the careful walls I had built, the fear of this exact day, they all came crashing down around me. I could feel every eye in the room shift, guests glancing nervously between me and the elegant stranger who had walked in like she owned the place. Nobody spoke, waiting for me to fill the silence. Vivian took a slow, graceful step forward, holding out the velvet box as if she were offering treasure. "Well," she said smoothly, her voice sweet but laced with poison, "aren't you going to introduce me to my grandson?" Her words cut like a blade. She didn't even ask for me, didn't acknowledge the years she had missed, the choices I had made, or the distance I had put between us. No, she went straight for what mattered most to me. My son, my heart, my weakness. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling but steady enough to hold. "This is not the time, Vivian." I didn't call her mom. Not anymore. That word had lost its meaning long ago. But she only smiled wider. "It's always the time, darling. You can't hide forever." And clearly, she glanced at my son with mock affection, "You haven't done a very good job of it anyway." The room tightened with tension. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should stay or leave, whispering softly to each other. The air was thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. My son tugged at my sleeve, his little voice innocent, asking, "Mommy, is she really my grandma?" The world stopped spinning. I knew this was the moment I had feared. The moment the truth could no longer be buried. And as I looked at my son, I realized I had a choice to make. I could cower, like the little girl I used to be, letting my mother's control swallow me whole again. Or I could stand tall, protect the family I had built, and fight back, once and for all. I bent down, holding my son close, my voice gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, yes. This is Vivian. She's my mother. But she's not the kind of grandma you've dreamed about." Gasps rippled through the room. Vivian's smile faltered for the first time, just slightly, but enough for me to see the crack. Daniel stood then, stepping in front of us, his voice calm but edged with steel. "This is a family celebration. You weren't invited. You need to leave." But Vivian didn't budge. Instead, she opened the velvet box with a deliberate flourish. Inside was a dazzling string of pearls, pristine, shining, the exact kind she wore every single day. She lifted it delicately, letting the light catch on every bead. "I came to give my grandson a gift," she said. "An heirloom. A piece of the family he belongs to." Her words weren't about love or connection. They were about possession. About control. She wasn't offering the pearls to my son, she was staking her claim on him, on me, on everything I had fought to build. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding, my hands still trembling but my voice finding its strength. "No, Vivian, he doesn't belong to you. He belongs to me, to us. And you will not walk into this house, into his life, and pretend like the years you abandoned me never happened." The silence was deafening. My son clung to my dress, looking between us with wide eyes. My husband's hand found mine again, steady and strong. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in her presence. I felt powerful, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my child. And I would never let her take him from me. Vivian tilted her head, studying me like I was some fragile thing she could break with just a whisper. "Nicole," she said softly, almost pitying, "you've always been dramatic. You've always thought the world was against you, when really, all I've ever done is try to shape you into the woman you were meant to be." Her words were sugar on the outside, venom on the inside. And for a second, I felt that old familiar sting, that creeping doubt she had planted in me years ago. But then I looked at my son, hiding his face in my dress, and I knew I couldn't let that poison seep in again. "You shaped me into someone afraid of her own shadow," I said, my voice louder than I expected. "Someone who thought love was supposed to hurt. Someone who thought silence was survival. But I'm not her anymore." The guests looked stunned. Some avoided my gaze, uncomfortable with the family drama unraveling in front of them. Others leaned in, sensing they were watching something raw, something real, something they'd talk about long after the party ended. Vivian laughed softly, a brittle sound. "You think this little life you've built makes you strong. You think hiding a husband and a child from me for 6 years makes you independent. Oh, sweetheart, it makes you a coward. And cowards always come crawling back. Daniel stepped forward again, his jaw tight, his patience wearing thin. Nicole doesn't crawl back to anyone, he said. Least of all someone who's spent her entire life trying to control her. You've had your say. Now leave. But Vivian didn't move. She placed the pearls back into the velvet box and snapped it shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the silence. You forget who you're speaking to, Daniel, she said coolly. I know the law. I know inheritance. I know the trust your father left behind, Nicole. And you wouldn't want to test me on that. The word sent a shiver down my spine. How did she know? The trust documents were locked away, carefully managed, kept safe. My father had been the only shield I'd ever had against her, and when he passed, his last act of love was ensuring my future couldn't be twisted into her control. He had left me a way out. A way to survive. But if she knew about the trust, then this wasn't just a visit. This wasn't about meeting her grandson. This was a calculated move. She had come prepared to strike where it hurt most. I steadied myself, forcing the panic down. You don't scare me with papers and threats anymore, I said. Whatever my father left me is mine. And you will never use it to control me, or my family. Her eyes narrowed, the warmth in her smile completely gone now. What stood before me wasn't a mother. It was a woman who saw her child as property, her grandchild as leverage, and her husband's legacy as a weapon. My son, sensing the tension, whispered, Mommy, I don't like her. The words were so quiet, but they hit harder than any blow. He didn't see a grandmother. He saw what I had always seen, control, coldness, danger wrapped in elegance. Vivian leaned down slightly, lowering her voice so only I could hear, though I knew everyone was straining to catch every word. You think you can keep me out, Nicole. You think you can erase me. But blood always finds a way back. And one day, when he's older, your son will come looking for me. He'll wonder why you hid me. And when he does, I'll be waiting. The audacity of her words burned through me. She was already planting seeds of doubt, trying to carve a future where my son would turn against me. I lifted my chin, every ounce of fear hardening into resolve. He won't come looking for you, Vivian. Because I'll tell him the truth. I'll tell him everything you've done. And when he's old enough to understand, he'll know exactly why you weren't welcome in his life. Gasps filled the room again. It was as if I had broken some unspoken rule by daring to confront her so directly. But I didn't care. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I was a mother. And mothers protect. Vivian straightened, her mask slipping back into place, her tone once again polished and calm. We'll see, she said, turning toward the door as if she was leaving on her own terms. Enjoy your little party, darling. But remember, pearls last longer than balloons. With that, she walked out, her heels clicking against the floor, the velvet box tucked under her arm like a trophy. The door shut behind her, and the room let out a collective breath, as though everyone had been holding it. Daniel wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. You did it, he whispered. You stood up to her. But I couldn't feel the victory yet. My chest was tight, my mind racing. This wasn't over. Vivian never lost gracefully, and if she had mentioned my father's trust, it meant she was already planning her next move. I glanced down at my son, who looked up at me with worried eyes. I smiled, though my heart was pounding. It's okay, sweetheart, I said softly. She won't hurt us. Not anymore. But deep down, I knew the fight had only just begun. The house felt different once she was gone. The laughter didn't return, the balloons looked dull, and even the cake seemed to lose its sweetness. Guests whispered their goodbyes, making excuses to leave early, their eyes filled with the kind of sympathy that only made me feel more exposed. They tried to smile, to reassure me, but I could see it, the shock of what they'd witnessed, the discomfort of being caught in a storm that wasn't theirs. By the time the last car pulled away and the front door clicked shut, the silence in the living room was almost unbearable. The decorations still hung from the ceiling, the candles sat half-burned, and my son had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a half-deflated balloon in his tiny hand. Daniel and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table. He poured me a glass of water, his face drawn but calm. He was always calm. He had been my anchor from the very beginning, the one person who had taught me that love didn't have to come with conditions. But tonight, I could see the weight in his eyes. She's not going to stop, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. You saw her. She knew about the trust. She came here with a plan, Daniel. That wasn't a surprise visit. That was a declaration of war. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. Then we prepare, he said simply. Your father didn't put those documents together for nothing. He knew what she was capable of. He made sure you'd have the protection you needed. Hearing him say it out loud steadied me, but the fear still clawed at my chest. She'll twist it, Daniel. She always twists everything. What if she finds a way to take it? What if she tries to take him? My eyes flicked toward the couch where our son slept, innocent and unaware of the storm brewing around. Him. Daniel's grip tightened. She won't. Not as long as I'm here. And not as long as you keep standing the way you did tonight. Nicole, I've never seen you like that before. You didn't flinch. You didn't let her break you. That was the strongest I've ever seen you. His words made my throat tighten. For so long, I had lived in fear of Vivian, shrinking under her shadow, doubting my every step. But tonight, even with my voice shaking and my hands trembling, I had stood my ground. And maybe that was strength, fighting even when you're terrified. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her smile as she left, that haunting line she'd thrown over her shoulder. Pearls last longer than balloons. It wasn't just a parting shot. It was a promise. I pushed back from the table and walked to the small safe tucked away in our bedroom. My hands trembled as I spun the dial, the familiar clicks echoing in the quiet house. Inside were the documents my father had left me, the trust papers, signed and sealed, the final piece of him I had to hold on to. I carried them back to the table, laying them flat in front of Daniel. If she knows about these, I said, then she's already trying to find a way to tear them apart. He leaned over the pages, scanning them carefully, though we'd both read them a dozen times before. Your father was thorough, he said finally. She can't touch this without breaking the law. And if she tries, we'll fight her in court. But court was her battlefield, not mine. I remembered the countless times as a child when she used lawyers like pawns, bending rules, intimidating anyone who stood in her way. The law was a tool she wielded like a sword, and she never hesitated to cut deep. I don't want my son growing up in the middle of her battles, I whispered. I don't want him hearing lies about me, about us. I don't want him pulled into her games. Daniel stood, walked behind me, and rested his hands gently on my shoulders. Then we stay ahead of her, he said. We don't wait for her to strike. We make the first move. I looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? He met my eyes with a steady calmness that both comforted and scared me. I mean we show her that she can't win. That you're not the same woman she used to control. That you have everything you need to fight her, and more. For the first time since she'd walked into that party, I felt a flicker of hope. Not just because of the trust papers, or the legal protection, but because I wasn't alone. I had Daniel. I had my son. And I had something I'd never had before, the courage to face her head-on. I glanced once more at the document spread across the table, my father's signature etched in bold ink. It was as if he was still here, whispering to me, reminding me that I wasn't powerless. That I had been given the tools to fight back. I closed the folder and took a deep breath. All right, I said. If she wants a war, then she's going to get one. Daniel smiled faintly, the kind of smile that told me he believed in me more than I believed in myself. That's my girl, he said softly. And as I sat there, listening to the quiet rhythm of my son's breathing in the next room, I knew one thing for certain. Vivian had walked into that party thinking she still held the power. But she was wrong. The next move would be mine. The next few days were unsettlingly quiet, almost too quiet, like the calm before a storm. I kept waiting for the phone to ring, for a letter to arrive, for something to break the silence. Vivian was not a woman who accepted defeat, and her silence was the most dangerous sign of all. On the third day, the letter came. Thick paper, expensive stationery, her unmistakable handwriting scrawled across the envelope. Just seeing my name written in her flawless script made my stomach twist. Daniel found it first, tucked neatly among the bills in the mailbox. He held it up without a word, his jaw tightening. I opened it slowly, careful not to rip the edge. Inside, the words were short but sharp, crafted like a blade meant to cut deep. Nicole, it pains me to see how far you've strayed. You've allowed outsiders to poison your mind and separate you from the family that raised you. This charade of independence cannot last. You are my daughter, and what belongs to you belongs to me as well. I will not allow you to squander your inheritance or deny me my rightful place in my grandson's life. We can do this quietly, or we can do this publicly. The choice is yours. Vivian. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling, the words burning themselves into my mind. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. She was ready to drag everything into the open, to use every weapon she had. Daniel took the letter from me, reading it silently. When he finished, he folded it neatly and set it on the table. So it begins, he said. My heart pounded in my chest. She's going to try to take everything. The trust, our son, even our peace. She won't stop until she feels like she's in control again. Daniel's eyes were steady. Then we don't let her. The very next morning, the phone calls started. Old family friends, acquaintances from her world of high society luncheons and charity galas, suddenly reaching out after years of silence. Their words were polite, but the undertone was clear, they had heard things. Whispers about my reckless marriage, about how I was cutting Vivian out unfairly, about how I had turned against my own blood. It was classic Vivian. She didn't just fight in courtrooms. She fought in whispers, in reputations, in the small cuts of social humiliation that added up until you bled. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. Every phone call, every sideways glance at the grocery store, every subtle remark from someone who meant well, was another reminder that she was pulling strings from behind the scenes. But she wasn't done yet. On Friday afternoon, a man in a crisp suit knocked on our door. He introduced himself as Vivian's attorney, polite but firm, holding a thick envelope of legal documents. He handed them to me with a practiced smile, the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. Inside was a petition. Vivian was formally challenging the trust, questioning its validity, and demanding visitation rights with my son. She was coming after both at once. I felt my knees weaken, the room spinning as I read the papers. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was about dismantling everything I had built. Daniel took the documents from my shaking hands, scanning them quickly. His face hardened, his voice calm but edged with steel. We'll get our own lawyer, he said. A good one. She's not going to scare us into submission. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a legal battle. This was personal. Vivian didn't just want access to my son. She wanted to remind me that no matter how far I'd run, no matter what life I had built, she could still reach in and take it all away. That night, as my son slept peacefully upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of papers, my father's trust documents on one side, Vivian's challenge on the other. It felt like a test. My father had left me these protections because he knew who she was. Because he knew that one day, she would come for me. And now that day had arrived. I pressed my hand against the folder, closing my eyes, whispering to myself. Not this time. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the frightened daughter hiding from her mother's shadow. I felt like a woman ready to fight. The storm had arrived. But so had I. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not just in temperature but in atmosphere. The polished wood, the echo of footsteps, the hushed whispers, it all felt designed to intimidate. Vivian sat across from me, poised and perfect in her pearls, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp with victory. She had chosen her seat like it was a throne, her lawyer at her side like a loyal knight. I sat beside Daniel, my own attorney flipping through documents, his calm demeanor a lifeline in the storm. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands clasped tightly together in my lap. I told myself I wouldn't look at her, that I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. But I couldn't help it. When our eyes met, her lips curved into the faintest smile. That dangerous smile. The same one she wore when she crashed my son's birthday. The proceedings began, her lawyer standing first, his voice smooth and rehearsed. He painted her as the victim, a devoted mother cast aside by a rebellious daughter, a grandmother unjustly denied access to her only grandson. He spoke of family duty, of legacy, of the unreasonable barriers I had built between Vivian and the child she had a right to know. Each word felt like a needle, sharp and deliberate. But I stayed silent, my gaze fixed on the table in front of me. Then it was my attorney's turn. He rose slowly, his voice calm but firm. He laid out the facts of my father's trust, documents signed and sealed with no room for dispute. He explained my right to protect my son, my right to decide who was allowed into his life. He didn't just argue the law, he reminded the court of something Vivian could never manipulate, that I was not a child anymore. I was a mother, and a mother's first duty is to protect her child. When he finished, the judge leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly as he looked between Vivian and me. There was no immediate decision. These things take time, but something shifted in the air. For once, the power wasn't all hers. After the hearing, we stepped outside into the cool air. Reporters lingered nearby, of course they did. Vivian thrived on spectacle, and she had made sure the press knew about this. She wanted me humiliated publicly, dragged through headlines and whispers. But as microphones were shoved toward me, I stood tall. My voice didn't shake when I said, "This is about protecting my family. Nothing more, nothing less." And then I walked away, Daniel's hand in mine, leaving the reporters to chase Vivian for her soundbites. That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Mommy, why was Grandma mad?" The question cut deeper than any courtroom speech. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Because she doesn't understand us. But you don't need to worry. Mommy's here. Daddy's here. You're safe." And for the first time, I truly believed it. But safety wasn't enough. I knew Vivian. She wasn't finished. If the courtroom didn't give her what she wanted, she'd find another way. She always did. So I made a decision. I opened my father's folder again, not just the trust documents but the letters he had left me. Letters I hadn't read in years, letters filled with advice, warnings, and love. And in one of them, I found something I had forgotten, an addendum, a clause in the trust that gave me more power than I had realized. It wasn't just about protecting the inheritance. It gave me control. Complete, irrevocable control over how it was managed and who had access. Vivian thought she was fighting me for a piece of it. She didn't realize she had already lost. I closed the folder slowly, a fire building in my chest. She had dragged me into her arena, into the courts and the gossip columns, thinking I would crumble under the weight of it. But this time, I had the weapon she didn't see coming. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to end this. I asked her to meet me. Not in her world of country clubs or downtown law offices, but in a quiet cafe on the edge of town. A place where no photographers lingered, no family friends could eavesdrop, no stage for her performance. Just the two of us, face to face. She arrived exactly on time, as always, elegance wrapped around her like armor. Pearls at her neck, flawless lipstick, the faint scent of her expensive perfume trailing behind her. She slid into the booth across from me, her smile polite but poisonous. "I must say, Nicole," she began, her voice smooth, "I was surprised you agreed to meet. I thought you'd keep hiding behind that husband of yours and those lawyers. But then again, you've always had a streak of defiance. It's unbecoming." I kept my hands steady around my coffee cup. For once, my heart wasn't racing. I wasn't the little girl sitting in her shadow. I was a woman, a mother, and I had something she didn't expect. "I didn't come here to argue," I said quietly. "I came to end this." Her smile widened, amused. "End this? Oh, darling, this isn't something you can just end. You've made choices that affect me, that affect our family's legacy. Choices have consequences." I slid the folder onto the table between us, the edges crisp, the pages inside neatly arranged. "Yes, and so does this." For the first time, her expression flickered. Just slightly. But I saw it, the twitch in her jaw, the shift in her eyes. She recognized the folder. My father's folder. "I found the addendum," I said, my voice steady. "The clause that makes it clear. The trust is mine. Every decision, every dollar, every detail. You can't touch it. You can't contest it. You can't twist it into something it's not. My father knew exactly what you'd try, and he shut the door before you even had the chance." She leaned back, trying to regain her composure, but the smile on her face was brittle now, cracked at the edges. "You think a piece of paper will stop me? You think a clause written by a man long gone can protect you from me?" "Yes," I said simply. Because it already has. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. She searched my face, looking for fear, for hesitation, for some crack she could slip through. But there wasn't one. Not this time. I leaned in closer, my voice low but unshaking. You've spent your whole life controlling me, tearing me down, making me believe I couldn't survive without you. But here I am. I built a life without your money, without your approval, without your shadow. And now you want to drag my son into your games. No, that ends here. Her eyes narrowed, the warmth gone, replaced by cold steel. You're making a mistake, Nicole. You'll regret this. No, I said, standing slowly, my hand on the folder. The mistake was letting you think you still had power over me. But I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm a mother, and I'll burn down every bridge between us before I let you hurt my son. For a moment, she said nothing. She just sat there, her pearls gleaming in the dim light, her perfect facade cracking ever so slightly. And then, softly, she laughed. A hollow, humorless sound. You've become more like me than you realize, she said. I met her gaze one last time. No, I've become stronger because I learned who not to be. With that, I tucked the folder under my arm and walked out of the cafe. My legs didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. For the first time in my life, I left her behind without looking back. And in that moment, I knew the truth. She could keep fighting, keep whispering, keep trying to claw her way back into my life. But it didn't matter, because the power she once held over me was gone. This time, I was free. The drive home from the cafe felt different than any drive I had ever taken before. The sky was wide and endless, the road stretching out like a promise. For the first time, there wasn't a shadow hanging over me. I wasn't rehearsing what I'd say to her next, or dreading the next move she might make. I had faced her, and I had won. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel was waiting at the door. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. The look on my face told him everything. He wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time in years, I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. Later that night, after our son was asleep, we sat in the living room with the folder open between us. I traced my father's signature with my fingertips, feeling the weight of everything he had left me. Not just the protection, not just the documents, but the reminder that he had seen me, that he had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Daniel looked at me, his voice soft. She's not going to stop overnight. But the difference now is, you don't have to live in fear of her. You're not under her control anymore. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. I know. For the first time, I know. The following weeks were quieter. Vivian's attempts grew weaker, her lawyers retreating when they realized the trust was airtight, her whispers losing power as the truth began to outshine her lies. The calls from concerned friends stopped. The gossip faded, and slowly, the world began to feel normal again. One afternoon, I watched my son run across the yard, his laughter echoing through the air as he chased bubbles Daniel blew into the wind. His cheeks were flushed, his smile wide, his joy pure. And I thought to myself, this is what I fought for. Not the money, not the legacy, not even the victory over her. I fought for this moment. For his laughter, for his peace, for the chance to raise him in a world where love wasn't tangled up in control, where family meant safety instead of fear. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me and whispered, "Mommy, are we happy now?" Tears stung my eyes as I kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, we're happy now," and I meant it. In the quiet that followed, I realized something even more powerful than freedom. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was choosing my own path, building my own family, and protecting it with a strength I never knew I had. Vivian had walked into my son's birthday party thinking she still owned me, thinking she could still twist me into her puppet. But she walked out with nothing. Because what she didn't understand, and what she never would, was that the greatest gift my father had given me wasn't money, or papers, or protection. It was the courage to finally say, no more. And that gift would last longer than pearls.